It all started with a simple ramp, a necessity for my daughter, who relies on it to navigate the world in her wheelchair. A ramp that gave her the freedom to move, the independence to play, and the dignity to live her life on her own terms. But someone I thought I could trust, decided that wasn't enough. They decided to take that away from her. For weeks, I noticed subtle signs of something off. The ramp would shift unexpectedly. The screws would loosen, and I could see the frustration in my daughter's eyes every time she struggled to get through the door. But I never imagined who would be behind it and why. It wasn't until I installed a hidden camera that the truth came crashing down. What I saw on that footage was worse than anything I could have ever imagined. There she was, Karen, the one who had been feigning friendliness, the one who smiled to my face while undermining my family behind closed doors. She was caught red-handed, admitting to what she had done. The sabotage, the deliberate attempts to make my daughter's life harder. And worse, she didn't even care. I've kept this story locked away, but no more. Today, I'm exposing everything. Every cruel word, every calculated move, and every devastating truth. The camera didn't lie, and neither will I. This isn't just about a ramp, it's about something deeper. It's about the lengths some people will go to make others suffer, and the way they disguise their hatred behind smiles. But it's also about fighting back. Standing up for my daughter, for my family, and for anyone who's ever been wronged by those who think they can get away with it. Get ready to watch the truth unfold, because what I caught on that hidden camera will leave you speechless. Life had always been a constant balancing act for me and my family. My daughter, Emma, was born with a condition that left her unable to walk, and from the moment she came into the world, we knew life wouldn't be like everyone else's. The world was designed for people who could walk, for people who didn't need assistance getting from one place to another. But we made it work. We built a life where Emma was able to move freely within the confines of our home. The ramp outside our front door wasn't just a ramp, it was her lifeline. It was the bridge between freedom and isolation. Without it, her mobility would be severely restricted, and her world would shrink drastically. Every day, she'd roll out onto the porch, her smile lighting up the space as she reveled in the smallest of freedoms. To her, that ramp represented the world outside of our home, the adventures she could embark on, and the independence she fought so hard to maintain. But recently, something had begun to feel off. It started small, scratches on the wood, a missing bolt here and there. It was subtle, almost too small to notice at first, but over time, I began to see the signs more clearly. The ramp would shift slightly when Emma rolled onto it, the screws would come loose faster than they should, and Emma's frustration grew. She couldn't understand why things were becoming harder for her. Why the ramp, which had always been so reliable, suddenly felt like an obstacle instead of a support. I tried to fix it myself, tightening screws, checking for damage, but each time I did, something else went wrong. It was as though the ramp was deteriorating on its own, faster than any wear and tear would normally cause. And that's when I noticed her. Karen, the woman who lived 2 doors down. She had always been a presence in the neighborhood, a self-proclaimed spokesperson for the HOA who liked to make sure everyone was following the rules. On the surface, she was cordial, even kind at times, but her smile always felt a little too tight, her compliments a little too forced. Karen had never hidden her disdain for anything that disrupted the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Our ramp, clearly a necessity for Emma, was an eyesore to her. It wasn't that Karen came right out and said it. It was the little comments she'd make as she walked by, the disapproving glance when Emma rolled down the ramp with her cheerful, uninhibited spirit. Not exactly the image we're trying to promote around here, is it? She'd mutter, always loud enough for me to hear. The words were always disguised with a thin layer of politeness, but over time, I began to feel the weight of the underlying judgment. Karen's words weren't just passive-aggressive. They were an attack on my daughter's existence, on the very things that gave her life meaning. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, Karen had always been vocal about improving the neighborhood. But when the issues with the ramp began to escalate, when screws started to come loose on a weekly basis, when the wood started to look more weathered than it should, I couldn't ignore the possibility that it wasn't just coincidence. Something didn't add up. And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's presence in the neighborhood wasn't as harmless as it seemed. The final straw came one afternoon when I overheard Karen talking to another neighbor while I was working in the yard. "I don't know why they even bother with that ramp," she said, loud enough for me to hear. "It's not like she can do much with it anyway. I'm sure no one cares." Her voice was dripping with condescension, and I could feel my heart racing as the words sank in. Was she suggesting something more? Was this just an idle comment, or was she involved in the damage to Emma's ramp? I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was behind it all, but I needed proof. I needed something solid, something that could expose her for what she truly was. That's when I made the decision to install a hidden camera, one that would catch her in the act if she really was the one sabotaging the ramp. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that someone could be so callous, so malicious toward a child who was already fighting so hard to have a normal life. But I had to know for sure. So I set up the camera, and what I uncovered would change everything. What I saw on that footage left me speechless, and it was only the beginning of the nightmare that was about to unfold. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Emma, always so cheerful, continued to struggle with the ramp, her confidence slowly slipping away. Every time she tried to roll out, something was wrong, something wasn't right. She'd start with a smile, but the moment her wheels would wobble or the ramp would shift under her weight, her face would fall. I could see the frustration in her eyes, and it broke my heart every time. It wasn't just a piece of wood, it was her gateway to the world, her connection to everything outside the house, and now it was betraying her. I couldn't stand seeing her like that, but I didn't have any answers. I kept tightening the bolts, fixing the alignment, but it wasn't working. I couldn't help but feel a gnawing suspicion deep inside me, a feeling that something more sinister was at play. This wasn't just poor maintenance, this felt intentional, like someone was deliberately trying to make Emma's life more difficult. But who? Why? The more I observed, the more I realized I was fighting against an unseen force. It wasn't just the ramp that had been sabotaged, it was my entire sense of security. Our neighborhood had always felt like a close-knit community. People waved, chatted in passing, and there was an unspoken sense of trust. But with Karen and her ever-present disapproval, that sense of peace was quickly crumbling. At first, I thought I was imagining it. It was easy to chalk it up to coincidence. But then, something happened that made my blood run cold. One evening, after another long day of trying to fix the ramp, I walked outside to check on Emma. She was sitting in her wheelchair, staring at the ramp, her eyes distant. It was as if the ramp, once a symbol of freedom, had become a source of dread. "Mom," she whispered, not taking her eyes off it, "it feels like someone's been messing with it again." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. How could she know? Had she been feeling the same thing? I tried to reassure her, but the truth was, I didn't know what to say. The ramp was malfunctioning in ways that defied logic. The boards were creaking in odd places, and the ramp, despite being reinforced, continued to shift under Emma's weight. It was only when I started paying closer attention that I realized the problem wasn't just in the structure, it was in the very foundation of what we had once trusted. The suspicion grew, and I knew something had to be done. It was only a matter of time before Karen showed her true colors, and I wasn't going to wait for her to destroy what little sense of normalcy we had left. The hidden camera was my last resort, my final attempt to catch her in the act. The more I watched her from a distance, the more I realized that I couldn't trust her. Every time she passed by, she'd give a quick glance toward the ramp, a look that wasn't quite casual, but wasn't overtly suspicious either. It was as if she was making sure everything was in place, ensuring that her sabotage was still intact. One afternoon, I decided to follow her, just to see if anything unusual happened. As I trailed behind her, I could feel my pulse quicken. She was walking with that familiar air of superiority, acting as if she owned the neighborhood. She passed by our house, her gaze lingering on the ramp before she made her way down the street. I noticed her glance back, just for a moment, but It was enough to make my heart skip a beat. Was she watching to see if we'd caught on? Was she testing the waters to see how far she could push us before we would retaliate? But it wasn't just Karen's actions that made the tension rise, it was the way the neighborhood was starting to shift. People who used to wave at us were now looking away. Conversations that had once been casual now felt heavy, like everyone was talking behind our backs. Karen's influence had started to seep into every corner of the community, and with it came a sense of isolation I hadn't felt before. I found myself second guessing every interaction, wondering if people were taking sides or if they were quietly agreeing with her. It wasn't just Karen I had to worry about, it was the power she had gained over others, the way she had turned my daughter's simple ramp into a symbol of discord. One night, I stood in the kitchen, staring out at the ramp, unable to shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The house felt eerily silent, the air thick with uncertainty. Emma had already gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the camera, about the proof I was about to uncover. I knew the moment I reviewed that footage, everything would change. The truth would come out. But even as I prepare myself for that, a small part of me hoped I was wrong. That I had misread the situation, that Karen wasn't capable of such cruelty. But deep down, I knew better. The hidden camera was my last hope for justice, and I couldn't back down now. The tension was suffocating. It was only a matter of time before the truth was revealed, and when it came, it would shatter everything. It had been a few days since I set up the hidden camera, and in those days, I had become almost obsessed with the thought of what I might find. Every creak of the ramp, every unusual movement outside, made my heart race with anticipation. I had hoped, no, prayed, that I was wrong. I wanted to believe that Karen wasn't behind it, that all of this was just some terrible misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I had to know the truth, no matter how hard it might be to face. I had spent hours researching the best way to capture the footage I needed. The camera had been discreetly installed, tucked behind a few potted plants on the porch, perfectly angled to capture the ramp's full length. I made sure the camera was motion sensitive, knowing that Karen wouldn't always pass by at the same time each day. I even timed it carefully, ensuring that when the camera was on, I wasn't around to disrupt anything. The last thing I needed was for Karen to catch on and cover her tracks. I wasn't about to let her get away with it. For days, I avoided even looking at the footage. I wasn't ready to face whatever might be waiting for me. But the frustration of not knowing finally got me. One evening, after another failed attempt at fixing the ramp, I sat down and pulled up the footage. My hands were trembling as I clicked play. I didn't know what to expect, but I couldn't ignore the gut-wrenching feeling in my stomach. Would I see Karen in the act? Would I see her walk away, smiling smugly, after sabotaging the one thing that kept my daughter's world intact? The first few minutes were uneventful. I watched as the camera recorded the quiet hum of the evening, birds chirping, the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The ramp was still intact, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, just as I was about to dismiss the footage, something caught my eye. There she was, Karen, appearing from behind a row of bushes as she made her way up to our front porch. I sat up straighter in my chair, my eyes locked on the screen. It wasn't just the fact that Karen was there, it was the way she moved. She seemed to be checking the area first, looking around cautiously, as if to make sure no one was watching. My breath caught in my throat as she approached the ramp. She stopped just before it, staring at it with an almost malicious gleam in her eyes. She bent down, fiddling with the loose screws that I had tightened just days before. Her movements were careful, deliberate. She wasn't just adjusting something by accident, she was tampering with it, making it unstable. I could see the malicious intent in her every action. I felt my heart sink as I watched. Karen stood up, glanced around once more, and smiled to herself, pleased with the damage she had caused. She turned and walked away, her satisfaction evident in the way she carried herself. But it wasn't over. As I rewound the footage and watched again, my blood ran cold. Karen wasn't just fixing the screws, she was deliberately loosening them, deliberately making the ramp unsafe. She wasn't just a passive bystander to this, she was the instigator. She had sabotaged the ramp. But there was more. As the camera continued to roll, Karen stood on the porch for a moment, almost as if she were savoring her work. Then she spoke. Her voice was low, but clear. That should make things a lot more difficult for them. She muttered to herself, her eyes scanning the ramp once more, making sure it was unstable. Let's see how long it takes for them to notice. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just trying to ruin my daughter's ramp, she was actively taking joy in it. She wanted to make our lives harder, to make Emma's life harder. And now I had proof. Concrete, irrefutable proof that Karen was behind the sabotage. But just as I was about to fast forward through the footage, something caught my attention again. There on the screen, Karen wasn't walking away. She was still lingering by the ramp, as if savoring her success. She stood there for a few seconds longer than I expected before bending down again. This time, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small tool, something sharp metallic. She moved swiftly, gliding it across the surface of the ramp, making another subtle cut, another imperfection. It wasn't just the screws this time, she was ensuring the ramp was damaged in multiple ways. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. This wasn't just a moment of carelessness, it was calculated, cruel, and well thought out. She had been planning this. And now she had gone even further. The act was no longer about simply causing inconvenience. It was about making sure that the ramp, the one thing that allowed Emma to feel free, was rendered useless. The truth was clear, and the reality was even more chilling than I had imagined. Karen hadn't just sabotaged the ramp once. She'd done it repeatedly, each time with the same malevolent intent. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the footage crashing over me. The room felt like it was closing in, the air thick with anger and disbelief. How could someone, anyone, be so cruel? How could they take pleasure in making a disabled child's life harder? The ramp wasn't just a piece of wood, it was Emma's lifeline. And Karen had shattered it. But I wasn't going to let this go. Not now, not ever. I had the evidence. And now, it was time to confront her. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I had the power to expose her, and that's exactly what I planned to do. The moment I had dreaded and longed for had finally arrived. The camera had provided the truth, undeniable and unambiguous. Karen had been caught red-handed, sabotaging my daughter's ramp, and now I was about to confront her with the evidence. It wasn't just about fixing the ramp anymore. This was about standing up for Emma, for our family, and for every ounce of respect Karen had torn away from us. But as I stood at the threshold of confrontation, I couldn't ignore the rising tide of emotions inside me, anger, betrayal, and a sense of utter disbelief that someone like Karen could even exist in our lives. I watched the clock tick, each second weighing heavier than the last. The hidden footage replayed in my mind, the image of Karen, smiling smugly after each destructive move, haunting my thoughts. I had been so sure of the truth, yet when the time came to confront her, I felt the cold grip of uncertainty in my chest. Would she admit to it? Would she deny everything? And if she did, how far was I willing to go to make her pay for what she had done? I had to act. I couldn't let this go. For Emma's sake, I had to be strong. I walked down the street, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on my shoulders. Karen's house stood a few doors down, its pristine lawn and perfectly manicured bushes almost mocking the anger I felt boiling inside. Her smile, the one she always wore like a badge of superiority, danced in my mind. I had never suspected how dark the person behind that smile really was. When I reached her front door, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I knocked firmly, each rap echoing like a drumbeat in the silence. I waited for what felt like an eternity before I heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching. The door swung open, and there she stood, as poised and composed as ever. Her expression shifted when she saw me, the usual smugness replaced by a faint sense of confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, feigning innocence. But there was no mistaking the guarded look in her eyes. She knew something was off. I think you know exactly why I'm here, I replied, my voice steady, but the fury that simmered beneath was hard to contain. You've been caught. On camera. Her eyes flickered with disbelief, and for a moment I thought she might actually try to deny it. But the reality of the situation quickly set in, and she bristled, her gaze shifting nervously. What are you talking about? Karen asked, her voice too calm, too controlled. I have the footage, I said, pulling out my phone. The act felt surreal, like I was about to deliver some earth-shattering revelation that would leave everything in ruins. But I wasn't prepared for the way she would react next. As soon as I showed her the video, her face went pale. Her jaw clenched, but she didn't say a word. The footage played, and I could see her body stiffen with every frame. There was nowhere to hide, no more lies to tell. The evidence was right in front of her. You've been sabotaging the ramp, haven't you? My voice wavered with a mix of anger and disbelief. You thought you could get away with it. Why? Why would you do this? For a moment, Karen stood there, her face a mask of anger and shame. But as the footage continued to roll, I saw her mask crack just a little. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come out right away. It was as if she were trying to form some sort of defense, some excuse to justify the unthinkable. I didn't, she started, but I cut her off. Don't lie to me. I shouted, unable to hold it in anymore. I watched you. I saw it all. You admitted it. You deliberately made my daughter's life harder. Why? Because of a ramp? Because of your stupid HOA rules. My voice cracked as the weight of the betrayal crushed me. That's your excuse? To hurt a disabled child. I felt the tears threaten to spill, but I fought them back. I couldn't let her see my weakness. Not now. I don't care about your HOA. I care about my daughter. And you've been so cruel to her. I trusted you. I thought you were a neighbor, a part of this community. But you're nothing but a coward. Her eyes darted around nervously, her expression flickering between defiance and guilt. It was clear she wasn't used to being confronted like this. She had never expected me to stand up to her, to call her out. She thought she could get away with it, that her position in the neighborhood gave her power. But I wasn't backing down. I didn't mean for her to go this far, Karen said, her voice suddenly small, almost pathetic. It was just a ramp. A ramp. I echoed, incredulous. Do you think you can minimize what you did? It's not just a ramp. It's my daughter's independence. It's her ability to get out of this house. And you tried to take that from her. I felt the rage rising inside me again, but I forced myself to stay calm. And don't you dare tell me you didn't know exactly what you were doing. You took pleasure in it, didn't you? Watching Emma struggle because of your petty grudge. You couldn't stand that a ramp, something that gives her freedom, was in your perfect little neighborhood. I stood there, waiting for her to respond. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. But just as I thought she might break, she took a deep breath and stood taller. You think I care about the ramp? Karen's voice was colder now, more venomous. I was just trying to make things better for everyone. You think it's right for her to be in that chair, making everything look so messy? People talk. People don't want to see things like that. It's not normal. It's not pretty. Her words hit me like a slap across the face. I had known that Karen was cruel, but to hear her say it so openly, to watch her justify her actions with such disdain, was like a knife twisting in my heart. You're sick, I spat, stepping back from her. You're a disgusting human being, and you've done more than just hurt Emma. You've hurt all of us. Karen's face flushed, but she didn't back down. There was no apology, no remorse. She just stood there, arms crossed, looking like she thought she had won. But she hadn't. Not by a long shot. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth about you, I said, turning to leave. You're going to pay for what you've done. As I walked away, my heart was heavy, but there's a sense of relief, too. The truth had come out. Karen could no longer hide behind her lies, and no matter what she did next, no matter how much she tried to cover her tracks, I had the power to expose her for who she really was. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun. The confrontation with Karen didn't go as I had imagined. I had anticipated anger, frustration, and maybe even some remorse on her part. But what I hadn't prepared for was the coldness with which she defended her actions. After the initial shock of being caught on camera, Karen's face twisted into something almost unreadable, a mix of frustration and an attempt at superiority. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit to her guilt. Instead, she did what I should have expected from someone like her. She tried to deflect responsibility. "You don't understand," Karen said, her voice sharp as though she had been wronged. "This neighborhood has standards. People have complaints. I was just trying to protect us from all of this. The ramp, everything, it's a distraction. It makes everything look messy. I never meant to hurt anyone." The words fell on deaf ears. It wasn't the first time Karen had made excuses for her actions, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. I felt my blood boil as she continued to spin her narrative. Her tone was calm, collected, but there was no denying that she had no remorse for what she had done. She wasn't sorry for the damage she had caused, nor did she seem to care about the emotional toll it had taken on our family. For Karen, it was just about her own vision of what the neighborhood should look like, even if it meant tearing down others to make that vision a reality. But what truly hurt the most wasn't Karen's attempt to justify her actions. It was the look on Emma's face. She had been in the room, listening to everything, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and sadness. As the confrontation escalated, I could feel her eyes on me, searching for answers I didn't have. She didn't say a word, but the hurt in her eyes was unmistakable. My heart sank as I watched her struggle to comprehend why someone could be so cruel, so unfeeling. It wasn't just the physical toll of the ramp that had taken its toll on Emma, it was the emotional damage that was even harder to heal. Every time she struggled with the ramp, she felt the weight of that struggle. But in that moment, it became clear that she had also been carrying the weight of Karen's cruelty. Emma had been caught in a web of hate that she didn't deserve, and I could see how it was slowly eating away at her spirit. As much as I tried to reassure her, I knew the damage had been done. I couldn't protect her from the harsh realities of the world, and that was the most painful realization of all. The aftermath of the confrontation didn't just stay within the walls of our home, it spilled over into the community. It didn't take long for the neighborhood to take sides. As soon as the truth came out, there was a flurry of reactions. Some of our neighbors rallied behind us, expressing their support, some even confronting Karen about her actions. But there were also those who quietly sided with her, or worse, remained silent, choosing to ignore the damage she had caused. It was clear that Karen had cultivated a certain level of influence over the community, and now, as her true character was exposed, those who had always been hesitant to speak up seemed too intimidated to do so. A few neighbors privately reached out, expressing their outrage at Karen's behavior, but the larger response was subdued. I couldn't help but feel betrayed by the very people I had thought I could trust. It felt like no one was willing to truly stand up for what was right, except for the few who had the courage to speak out. But the support we received was not enough to erase the sense of isolation that now permeated our lives. As for Karen, she didn't make a public apology or show any signs of remorse. Instead, she became even more entrenched in her delusion of righteousness. She avoided us, keeping her distance, and her interactions with the neighborhood became more passive-aggressive than ever. I knew she had no intention of admitting to her wrongdoing. Instead, she continued to manipulate the narrative, twisting the situation to make herself appear as the victim. But as the weeks passed, the weight of the situation didn't lessen, it only grew heavier. Emma struggled to move on from the experience. The ramp was fixed, but the emotional scars remained. Every time she saw Karen, there was a lingering sense of unease. The damage that had been done to her confidence, to her sense of security, couldn't be easily undone. I watched as she slowly withdrew into herself, no longer the carefree child she once was. She spent more time inside, avoiding the porch and the ramp that had once been her doorway to the world. It was as if the simple act of going outside had become a reminder of everything she had endured. I tried to reassure her, to remind her that we would get through this together. But the truth was, I didn't know how to fix the broken pieces. No matter how much I told her that we were safe, that the ramp was fixed, the emotional toll had taken root deeper than I had anticipated. In the end, the fallout from the confrontation was more than just a broken ramp. It was a fracture in the fabric of our family's life. Karen's actions had exposed the ugly reality of how some people could hurt others without a second thought. And the worst part was that despite everything, she still felt justified in her behavior. As much as I wanted to protect Emma from the cruelty of the world, I couldn't shield her from the harsh truth that sometimes people like Karen exist, and there was no escaping the emotional aftermath of what she had done. The battle wasn't over. But it wasn't just about the ramp anymore. It was about reclaiming what we had lost in this fight. It was about rebuilding trust for both Emma and for myself. And as I looked at my daughter, trying to reassure her with a forced smile, I knew that our journey to healing had just begun. The aftermath of the confrontation with Karen left a deep, lasting impression on our family. In the days that followed, I did what I could to hold everything together. While the ramp was repaired and Emma slowly started using it again, it became painfully clear that the true repair would be far more complicated than fixing a set of screws. The emotional toll it had taken on her was more insidious than I had ever anticipated. The ramp was no longer just a tool for mobility, it had become a symbol of the betrayal she had endured, and it would take more than just time to restore her confidence and sense of security. As for Karen, she never apologized. Not once did she admit to her cruelty or express any real remorse. In fact, she became even more reclusive, avoiding eye contact and keeping her distance from everyone. I could see her in the neighborhood, trying to act like nothing had happened, pretending to go about her business as if her actions hadn't caused a ripple in our lives. The strange thing was, she didn't even seem to understand the weight of what she'd done. She didn't face any direct consequences, and her relationships with the neighbors remained mostly intact. Some, though, had begun to distance themselves, unwilling to tolerate her behavior any longer. A few of them even reached out to me privately, expressing their disappointment and disgust, but none of them were brave enough to confront Karen openly. I could have reported her to the HOA or even taken legal action, but part of me knew it would only fuel the fire. Karen wasn't someone who would be swayed by a lawsuit or a formal complaint. She would just twist the story further, making herself the victim in the eyes of the community. The damage was already done, and dragging the situation out would only prolong the emotional toll on Emma and me. So, I made the difficult decision to let go of the idea of retribution. I focused on what really mattered, protecting Emma from the lasting effects of this betrayal. For Emma, the journey toward healing had just begun. At first, she had a hard time even looking at the ramp. Every time she rolled up to it, she would hesitate, her eyes filled with uncertainty, as if she were expecting something to go wrong. I watched her struggle with this invisible weight, the fear that someone might try to hurt her again, the vulnerability that had crept into her soul. It broke my heart to see her like this, and I realized that I had to help her regain her sense of trust in herself and in the world around her. I made sure to reinforce the idea that she was strong, that the ramp wasn't just a symbol of her weakness, it was a symbol of her resilience. We replaced it with a brand new one, sturdier and more reliable than ever. This time, it wasn't just about the physical ramp, it was about the emotional barrier we needed to break down. Every time Emma rolled across it, I reminded her that she had fought for her independence and that no one had the right to take that away from her. As she began to use the new ramp more confidently, something shifted in her. Slowly, she started to venture outside again. The smile that had once disappeared from her face started to return. But it wasn't just the ramp that was healing, it was her spirit, her sense of self-worth that was being rebuilt. I did everything I could to reassure her that she wasn't alone in this. I made sure she knew that no matter what, I would always stand by her side. And while Karen may have gotten away with her actions without facing any real consequences, the resolution of this chapter was about something far more significant. It was about reclaiming our peace, protecting Emma's emotional well being, and strengthening the bond we shared as a family. I knew the world could be cruel, but I also knew that together we could face whatever came our way. The damage Karen caused may never be fully undone, but the lessons learned from this ordeal would stay with us forever. Emma had learned to navigate the ramp with confidence once more, but I knew this wasn't just about the ramp. It was about the resilience she had discovered in herself and the strength we had discovered in each other. We had faced the storm, and while the scars remained, we were finally beginning to heal. Looking back on everything, I've come to realize that standing up for my family wasn't just about confronting Karen or fixing a ramp. It was about protecting my daughter's right to feel safe, respected, and valued in the world. The system around us, whether it was the HOA or even the people who lived in our neighborhood, often felt broken, and it seemed as though no one would ever be held accountable for their actions. But in that moment, when Karen's cruelty had taken root in our lives, I knew I had no choice but to fight back. And in doing so, I not only fought for Emma, but I fought for all of us, for our peace, for our sense of security, and for our dignity. The journey we've been through, the pain of watching my daughter struggle, has shown me just how strong we really are. Emma is stronger than I could have ever imagined. She's faced challenges that no child should ever have to face, but she's done it with a bravery and resilience that leaves me in awe. When she hesitated to use the ramp, I knew it wasn't the ramp itself that was the problem, it was the emotional weight she carried, the fear that someone might try to hurt her again. But every day, she chose to move forward. Every day, she reminded me that we could rebuild, we could heal. Her strength has become a beacon of hope for me, a reminder that no matter how broken things may seem, there's always a path forward. As a family, we've come out of this stronger than ever. We've learned to lean on each other in ways I never anticipated. The love and support we share has been our anchor through the darkest times, but we've also learned that resilience doesn't mean just surviving. It means thriving even when the world is trying to tear you down. I have learned that no matter how difficult things get, no one can take away our strength unless we allow it. No one can take away our peace unless we let them. We are not victims of circumstance. We are warriors who fight for what's right. And if you're reading this and you find yourself facing something similar, whether it's hatred, discrimination, or cruelty, I want you to know this. Your family is worth fighting for. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Don't let anyone take away your right to stand tall. The world can be a harsh place, but it's in these moments of adversity that we discover our true strength. So, fight for your loved ones. Stand tall, even when it feels impossible. You are not alone in this. And like Emma, you too will find the courage to rise above the hate and emerge stronger on the other side. We've faced obstacles, but we've learned that we can overcome them together. And no one, no matter how cruel or malicious, will ever make my daughter or my family feel less than again. If you've ever faced injustice or fought for the well-being of your loved ones, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your story. Let's stand together and show the world that we won't let anyone tear us down. If you're inspired by the resilience and strength shown here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of courage, perseverance, and community struggles. We'll keep fighting for what's right, and together we can make sure no one is ever denied access to justice, respect, and dignity. Join us on this journey and become a part of the HOA Denied Access community. Together, we can make our voices heard.